Hello my friends, this is Sylvie Curry and I'm once again in my kitchen. Today I'm going to be going through prepping and trimming in addition to smoking a brisket. This brisket is going to be for one of my friends, so everything that I do may not be competition worthy, but it's good enough to get a very good product out. I would like to start with my setup. I usually have disposable cutting boards on hand. Glove-wise, I usually have a cotton glove underneath with my regular gloves, and that way it just keeps my hands warm and it's easier to handle cold meat. I always have a pair of scissors and my knives. I have a chef knife and a fillet knife that I use. And any brand that you like, you can go for it. I have no major suggestions. In addition, when I set up, I usually have a couple of trash bags. I have one in a sink that's right next to my cutting board, and that is to drain, like when I open this vacuum pack, there may be liquids in there to drain it in there. And during the course of trimming, I have another trash bag that I set up for all my fat and trimmed off parts of the brisket. I also have a stack of paper towels, and that's just to wipe down things as I go along. So let's get to this brisket. This is a 14-pound prime brisket that I got from Costco. You know, sometimes they have very good primes, and sometimes I've had some that weren't so good. It's just a matter of trial and error. This one looks okay. It's got a fairly thick section on that side, but fairly thin on that side. Since this is for a friend, I'm not going to trim all of that off because it's still good eats. What I like to do first is to trim off a lot of the hard fat that's in this section and the fat that runs along the side here, and get those out of the way. Trimming is relaxing to me. I just like to go through and just look at the brisket and see, okay, what can go, what can stay. What is it that's going to make this brisket stand out as far as appearance, and the way that if I were doing it for competition, the way that it would look in the box. In addition, I like to trim off a lot of the silver skin that's here on the top, and that's a fillet knife is probably the best way to do that. And it gets right in there and just take all of that off. Trimming that in competition is very important. Do I need to trim as heavily for a home brisket? No, but I think my hand just does it anyway, just because I'm so used to doing it. So we'll get a lot of this off. My setup is aimed at maximizing how much I get cleaned up during the trimming process. But as always, there are pieces that just take off from you. There's a little gash in there from the butcher, and that happens with even the best manufacturers, and it's just a matter of hit or miss. And a lot of times you just hope that they're in areas where you can trim around it. I'm going to finish trimming up this brisket, and I'm going to refer you, I have another video on how to trim a competition brisket, and I'll try to leave that link in the description so that you can refer to it for a more detailed trimming process that I go through. Well, I've got my brisket all trimmed up. This, as I mentioned before, this is a prime brisket that I purchased from Costco. It has a few issues, but that's okay. This is not my usual competition trim. In competition, I would separate the flat from the point. However, I'm going to cook this one attached. One of the reasons being that it's a very thin flat, and number two being, just didn't feel like separating it. You'll also notice I did not take off all the silver skin. In competition, I would have trimmed off all that silver skin, and I would have cut the brisket such that The prime part that I would be slicing would be this area. So I would have trimmed off all of this and all of that, and I would only have slices from this area. The point is actually a well marbled point, and I'm curious to see how that's going to cook up. In addition, on the point in competition, I would have sliced off this top part of the point and made it even across. This is usually very stringy and doesn't render very well as far as making burnt ends or anything like that. For injection, I use Big Papa Smoker's cattle prod, and I mix that as a 1/4 cup and 2 cups of water, and I'm going to be injecting this into my brisket, and that process is fairly common. Just pour some, and I pour some in a cup like this just in case I don't use all of that. If I have to save it tomorrow for when I wrap, then it will be available. So I take my injection, pull it up in my syringe, and you can use any kind of syringe. There's no one better or whatever it is what you like to use. I usually go in a pattern, dot, 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 dot. Some people call that a checker pattern. I'm not really sure because I don't go in a checker shape, but I inject in and pull back the needle as you're injecting. That way you don't get a big blob of injection in one place. It gets distributed over the strings of the striations rather of the meat. Inject in, pull back. Inject in, pull back. And not all of it's going to go in. Sometimes you have a brisket that's very thirsty and it'll take in a lot. And sometimes you have one that, just says, got enough, that's it. I usually also cover my hand over the needle to keep the juice from sprouting out and all over every place. Sometimes you get pieces or parts of it that do go out, but in general, it prevents a lot of the big sprays. So as you see, I'm going along a pattern, and one of the other things regarding the injection, I said I use water plus the cattle prod from Big Papa Smokers. The water that I use is not plain old faucet water. I use a reverse osmosis water, and sometimes I even use distilled water. And that way it prevents the injection from staining the meat when you slice it. So this is my injection pattern. I'll inject with the grain for the flat. When I do the point, I usually go against the grain. And you say, why? Why does it matter? Mainly because the point has a lot of striations in it, and when you go in with the grain, then it doesn't distribute as well as it would if you went across the grain. I've completed the injection of the brisket, and one of the things I forgot to mention was I told you that I inject the point, which is this section, going across the grain, and I inject the flat with the grain. One of the primary reasons for injecting the flat with the grain is so that you won't have injection marks or holes going across a slice. And that can be very important in presentation in a box for competition. Okay, let's season this baby. For seasonings, I use 3 major seasonings. One being, in this container I have pepper cow, which is made by Simply Marvelous Barbecue. And I just put it in this container because I like the holes in it and the way that it flows. The other rub that I use is called Cash Cow, and that's by Big Papa Smokers, and that gives it a nice beefy flavor, and it has some salt in it, so you have to be careful. I use Season All, and Season All complements the Pepper Cow in addition to the cash cow, pepper cow and cash cow seasonal. Those are my go-to seasonings for brisket. First I start with the back side of the brisket, and I know a lot of people say they don't season the fat because what good is it to season the fat? You're not going to eat it. I season it because it renders down in the drip pan, and so the juices that are in that drip pan I may use to wrap my meat, or sometimes I may even use it in the process of getting it ready to box. So I want that seasoned. So we'll start off, and I'll go on the sides. The other thing, make sure when you have your seasoning that you shake them up so that they're evenly distributed. So some big flakes may be in there that come out first and then or come out last, and then you have the little flakes, but you want them evenly distributed within the container. It's also important during the time that you're seasoning to do some shakes too to get them evenly distributed. So I'm going with a light coating all over the brisket. This is the back of the brisket, or the fat side. Then I'll go in with some seasonal, and the seasonal is mainly the salt portion of the rub, with some additional yummy spices and things to make this thing pop. Go around the edges, and then across the back, light coating. Then I put on my pepper cow. I started using pepper cow, oh God, years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's a Simply Marvelous product, and when he was in his development phase, I used it testing wise, and lo and behold, I started hitting in brisket. When I started hitting in brisket, we knew this was a winner, and went on to become one of the major seasonings that are used in brisket today. Okay, so now I'm going to get my full pan, and I'm going to put the brisket in the full pan, fat side down, and I'm going to get rid of this disposable cutting board. I don't need it any longer. And we'll put that away. Move my brisket up here, and then we'll do the same sequence of seasonings as we did on the back. The only thing is we've already done the sides, so we don't need to go over those again. The light coating, cash cow, seasonal, coating of it. It is salty, so be careful. And then my pepper cow. Once I put these rubs on there, I then put the briskets back in the refrigerator, and I let them set. Usually in a competition, they're going to set for overnight, because I'm cooking hot and fast. And that's just the way that I do it. I know a lot of people don't season until, when they cook hot and fast, they don't season until the morning of. But I let it have a big chance overnight to get in there and sweat. Okay, so we've injected our brisket. We've seasoned it with a combination of products. I'm going to put it in the refrigerator overnight, and tomorrow morning I'm going to cook this baby. I'm going to cook it hot and fast. I've got my smoker all set up, and we've got the DigiQ set for 350 degrees to cook this brisket hot and fast. My smoker is loaded up with some Royal Oak Classic, and it's going strong so far. We've got smoke coming out of the chute. Inside my smoker, I do cook my brisket with a water pan. So the water pan is in there now, and it's filled It's a full pan, filled about halfway. So far, everything's looking good. We'll get the briskets on. Probably take about another hour or so to get this smoker up to temp. It is a cold day out here. Temperatures, and I say that hesitantly, I am in Southern California. Cold day with temperatures in the upper 50s. And for us, that is pretty cold. Briskets are in here and they're getting happy. This is probably about 15 minutes worth of time in here. So this is one of the briskets, and it's going to be ready to wrap. Actually, it's probably ready to wrap now, but I'm going to give it just a little bit more time. Okay, I'm all set up to wrap my briskets. I've got my wrapping solution. Ordinarily, I use Stubbs beef marinade mix, but I saw in the store the other day this stuff. It's a marinade mix for beef, and it has the same major ingredients, soy, garlic, and red pepper, listed on the label as on the bottle. The only difference is they suggest in this one that you mix it with apple cider vinegar, oil, and water. I'm going to leave out the oil, but I did put a little bit of apple cider vinegar in there, 2 tablespoons per pack, and I used 2 packs of it. 2 tablespoons of water. I increased the water. Instead of the 1/4 cup of oil, I made it a 1/4 cup of water. And so that's going to be my wrap mixture. So let me go get these briskets, bring them in here, and I can show you what to do. Got the brisket. I'm going to move it over to my foil. And actually, from the way they looked when I first prepped them to now, there is a major difference. They've plumped up quite a bit. A lot. Actually, quite a bit. Ooh, can't put that there. I'll block you out, won't I? Okay. So this is my brisket. Let me get a better picture of it for you. Okay, and I once again cooked it with the point still attached to the flat. When you prep a biscuit for competition, you don't want it to be too crusty on the outside because it tends to flake apart when you go to cut it. But this is about right. I'm pretty happy with the way this looks right now. So let me set it back up again. Okay, we got this brisket ready to wrap, and I think this is a better angle for you. I have double foil, and I try to have enough foil lengthwise so they can come over and form sort of like a pocket for it. Before I do that, I'm going to, well actually, what I'm going to do first, I'm going to form the pocket for you. We're going to make sure that we get the brisket tightly wrapped. So I'll do this on one side, and then I'll go on the other side and also form a tight packet. And I know you probably can't see this, but I don't have a camera person, it's just me here. So let's go for this. Get it pretty tight there. And so you see we have a pocket. Then I'm going to take my temperature probe, and I've got it set to go off at 212. I'm going to be checking before then, because sometimes the brisket can get ready anywhere from 208 to about 212. So I'm going to go in, put that off to the side. There. I'm going to take my mixture here and pour about half of it in, and then finish wrapping up my packet here. Now try to get it as tight as I can. And I do this probe this way primarily for competition so that it's not going through the foil. That way you decrease the probability of getting DQ because of a piece of tin foil. I use that word, tin foil. A piece of foil in your brisket. I put it back in the pan, and then I'm going to just, see, we got back in the pan, and I'm going to put it back in the smoker. And if you see here, the temperature of that brisket currently is about 166. I don't temp probe it before I wrap, because I know that after, if the cooking is hot and fast, and my temperature on my DigiQ says I'm at, actually right now it says I'm at over 350. And I know that after 2.5, going close to 3 hours, it's going to be at 166. So let me put this in, and we'll come back again later on and check the temperature and see how the brisket's doing. There are some juices that come off the brisket, and I'm going to preserve those because I can use those later on. I'll defat them, and I can use that for my, when I get ready to prep the slices, and when I get ready to, well, in competition, instead of me studying through it, in competition what we do is I take this and I mix it with some other au jus mix, and I dip my brisket in that au jus mix and then put it in a box, and that adds moisture to it. My temperature probe says it's 208, but when I went in, just like butter, easy in, easy out, means that brisket is ready. So I'm going to open it up and let it vent. You usually let it vent. It's really cold out here tonight, so I'm not going to leave it to vent very long. And then I'm going to take it inside, let it chill down. And because both of these briskets are for a friend, I won't be able to do a slice or anything like that, but I can do a jiggly test. Let's see if I can do that now. Quite hot. It's done. No doubt about that. Brisket. Hot and fast. Took approximately, about 5 hours. Got it up to 208 and got the tenderness I wanted, so I pulled it. Here's our brisket. Looking good. I prepped the prime brisket to give to my friend, put it in a vacuum pack. I also made a sauce to go along with it. This sauce is a combination of the juices that were cooked in the brisket in the wrap, and I added a barbecue sauce, a savory barbecue sauce is added to it. Not really sweet, make sure it's savory. And as I mentioned to you before, I actually did 2 briskets. This is the second one, and they're about the same, no difference. And they are also going to, this one is also going to a friend. So here we have prepped and completed briskets ready to gift a friend.